As we want to bring in attorney and American Frontier Strategy CEO Mehek Cooke. Mehek, listen, seems to be cut and dry. If you look at it from one perspective, it's an ICE facility. You could make a phone call in advance when you're a congressperson, and they could simply say, we'll set it up. But if you try to storm the place, I think you're probably going to get arrested. Am I off base on that?
Kevin, you nailed it. Look, I think what Democrats are trying to do today is showing us exactly who they are. This was a political stunt that really backfired. They're using violence. They're inciting fear against law enforcement. And they continue to be a party that says nobody is above the law unless you're a Democrat and you're a politician. They're continuing to show the American people, instead of being at a higher bar, I think politicians should be. I mean, they're the ones that are leaders today. They're continuing to get these fringe groups out there to attack other Americans that don't agree with them. This is a very cut and dry case. Anybody who was there that was assaulting a police officer should be fined for trespassing and behind bars today. This is very cut and dry. This is not a political issue. This is about protecting the American citizens. And law enforcement were dragged out there having to arrest people like this New Jersey mayor instead of doing their jobs. And I think this is despicable. This law and order has to be restored in America today. This is why more and more Democrats are coming towards the Republican Party. It's just common sense.
And you know what? Frankly, they create a terribly unsafe situation for the working women and men of ICE. They're simply trying to keep the peace there. It's one thing, again, to come and protest, but if you try to storm the place, things can escalate, quite frankly. I've been on stories out in the field. It can change in a blink. Let me ask you, while we have you, Mehek, about something that's been in the news. Stephen Miller talking about habeas corpus. The suspension thereof, in particular when we're being invaded. Listen to this sound. I'm going to get your reaction and see if you can explain to the folks at home why this is perhaps alarming some.
The Constitution is clear, and that, of course, is the supreme law of the land, that the privilege of the writ of habeas corpus can be suspended in a time of invasion. So I would say that's an option we're actively looking at. Look, a lot of it depends on whether the courts do the right thing or not.
I think the last thing he said there is incredibly important. It depends on what the courts do. If they want to keep having one person in some district basically lord over the entire executive branch in the entire country, things can happen, like what Stephen Miller just described there. Explain, if you would, Mehek, what he means by that and why there seems to be a great deal of uproar on the left.
Look, Kevin, I think the first and the last line of defense today are our courts. And when you have judicial activism where courts aren't following the rule of law, then President Trump has to look at every single constitutional option, and it has to be on the table, such as suspending habeas corpus. President Trump has a constitutional duty to protect the American people under Article 2. That meant he invoked the Alien Enemies Act. He was swiftly trying to defend not only our borders, but the American people against Tren de Aragua and all of these threats that we've been facing for 4 years of public safety. The Supreme Court's decision previously has been misguided. The Supreme Court has told President Trump he needs to pause and allow for these trials to occur for every single illegal alien. But at the end of the day, it's public safety and national security that's going to trump habeas corpus. So I believe under the suspension clause, it specifically states, if an individual, if a president is looking at an invasion or they're looking at rebellion, then we need to suspend habeas corpus. And I think that's where President Trump is looking today. Can we give these illegal immigrants tons of due process? I mean, our courts are going to be backlogged for years. And what about the good legal immigrants that want to come to our country? I mean, we have to look at both sides of this today. So I think Stephen Miller is correct. President Trump should be looking at suspending habeas corpus if the Supreme Court cannot understand that the rule of law is with him and not these judicial activist judges.
Yeah, I'm so glad you mentioned that, too, because in effect, then, what would have happened is over the last 4 years, if you let in, I don't know, 20 million people, then you're going to try to have 20 million different court dates for people who ostensibly, some have argued, most of whom, or many of whom, broke the law just to get here. This is a fascinating legal case. You and I could talk about it all day. But very quickly, before we let you go, I just want to get your sense on one other topic. You and I have had a chance to chat off camera about this judicial activism. How concerned are you, Mehek, in the 40 seconds we have left, about this trend. I don't recall this ever happening for President Obama, and certainly not for President Biden.
Well, look, Kevin, I think that the Democrats were always going to use lawfare. They couldn't win by assassinating President Trump. They couldn't win by stopping him to go on every single ballot as he continued to move and win this election. So what are they trying to do now? They're trying to stop President Trump through judicial activism. And what we need today is expedited removal of illegal immigrants, not bureaucrat delays. So again, I'm calling on the Supreme Court. They are the last line of defense. And I think a lot of these judicial activist judges should not have their positions. I think it's such a disgrace, and I'm calling on Congress to pass a law. We have to put an end to this madness.
I think there are a great number of Americans who would certainly agree with that. Mehek Cooke joining us today from the great state of Ohio. Mehek, great to see you, my friend. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hey everyone, I'm Emily Campagno. Catch me and my co-hosts Harris Faulkner and Kaylee McEnany on Outnumbered every weekday at 12 p.m. Eastern, or set your DVR. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page for daily highlights.